Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the very south of the country. This time we're going to go back to a brewery that you've seen me review a good number of beers from before, and this is the latest instalment in their more experimental series that they've been releasing recently. So for this one then we are going to go to Brggeri, which is just to the south of Hyllie in the southern part of Malmö, and we're having a look at yet another beer from Hyllie Bryggeri. So this is another one from their Lab series. This is Hyllie Labs number 4, and it's called the Double Nitro Stout, coming in at 10% ABV. And yeah, I think this one should be a little bit of a beast. This is the first Imperial Stout I've had that's been brewed by Hyllie Bryggeri. A couple of years back I did have a collaboration that they did with Brygeri from Landskrona. That was an Imperial Stout, but this is the first one I've had that they've actually brewed themselves. So this should be quite interesting. It's not often that I review nitro conditioned beers either. I'm still not sure how I feel about that as a conditioning. The beers that I've had with it have been like very, very smooth, and you know, I kind of got into beer on German beer, so I do like a little bit of carbonation in my beers, I have to say. So as I say, not sure how I feel about nitro conditioning, but maybe it's something I do need to just get a little bit more used to and try a few more beers that use it. I think the last nitro conditioned beer that I had was Left Hand Brewing's White Russian, and that must have been about 2 years ago or something that I reviewed that beer, and that's, you know, because I don't have so many of them, that's why I remember exactly what beer it was. But yeah, very, very curious to see how this one turns out. Nice to have my first Hyllie Bryggeri brewed Imperial Stout as well, and I should also say that this beer was released as part of the Lokal Småskaligt assortment in Systembolaget for November of 2020. I think the exact release date for this was the 1st of November, if I'm remembering rightly. But yeah, 10% Imperial Stout this one, and it's got a few other little bits and bobs added into it as well. So yeah, this one I think should be very interesting. It's got wheat in it as well, so I think that'll make it quite nice and smooth and things. So yeah, definitely nice to return to Hyllie Bryggeri once again, and interesting to have another different style from them. These guys are a very highly rated brewery in Sweden at the moment, and it's quite rightly justified in my experiences, from my experience so far. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Hyllie Bryggeri before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like me to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Hyllie Bryggeri then, on to my brewery notes. So, Hyllie Bryggeri started off as the homebrewing experiments of Michael Nathorst, who is from Brggeri, as I said, just a little bit to the south of Hyllie in the southern part of Malmö. And for a number of years he was a home brewer, and he built up his own brewery in his garage, where he was experimenting with different beers with a lot of his friends, and he started brewing there in around 2013. But he worked for a number of years in the plumbing industry, and for a period of time he was working 4 days as a plumber and then 1 day with his brewery. So he's also good friends with Torsten Ekne, who is the original owner of the Beerditch bar in Malmö. Highly recommend you check that out. But when Beerditch began, Michael decided to turn his garage brewery into a proper business, and he registered Hyllie Bryggeri in 2015 as an official company. So these days Michael is joined at the brewery by Erik Fritihoff, who is a partner in the company these days, and he deals with the sales and marketing, but he's also one of the founders of the Great Swedish Beer Festival, and he's really helped them kind of get out there a little bit more over the last little while. But in 2019 the brewery joined forces with Psycho Pipes and Limhamns Bryggeri to form a new company that owns a brewery building And it was there that the three companies were brewing their beers for a period of time. But they started there with a 1,000 litre brew kit, but this arrangement only lasted for a few months before Hyllie Bryggeri moved to a farm near Fintria, because the agreement just kind of didn't work out. For what reason exactly, I don't know. But throughout 2020, they've been contract brewing a few of their beers to get them out there at a slightly bigger volume, and they've just invested in a new premises in Malmö, which is to the north, actually, of the central station. Is it to the north, or I always forget the orientation. It's either to the north or west. It's kind of on the kind of Vesterham side, if you like, of the station, if you like, and just a little bit north. But this is basically a car garage at the moment, and it's going to be converted into a brewery with a 2,000 litre brewing system. And they've also recruited Johan Lagerkrantz as their head brewer, who has spent recent years in New Zealand. I think he's been out there for like 5 or 6 years, something like that, and he's returning home now. But as of November 2020, when I'm filming this review for you, Hyllie Bryggeri have produced around 70 different kinds of beer, and as I said to you, these guys are very, very highly rated. In my opinion, the two beers that I would always recommend for you from Hyllie Bryggeri would be the Hyllie Pan, which is a kind of classic, proper old school West Coast IPA, Citra Simcoe USO 5 yeast, if I'm remembering rightly, and the Skånsk Lager, I think, is a beautiful example of the Helles lager beer. That's one of my favourite lagers, I think, definitely. The only problem I have with the Skånsk Lager is that they don't sell it in half litre bottles, but apparently it's coming out in 440ml cans soon, so very much looking forward to that. Actually, I really love that beer, I have to say. That's probably my favourite one from these guys so far. They really know what they're doing when it comes to lager beers, in my mind. So I'd love to see them do, some Schwarzbiers and a Dunkel and a Doppelbock or something like this. That would be awesome. But yeah, as I say, they've got this Lab series these days as well, which was they started releasing that in 2020, and we've had 4 offerings from it so far. There was the Cartwright Double IPA, then there was the Black IPA, and they also, I forget what the Black IPA was, but that was brewed in collaboration with one of the little gypsy brewers in Minus Et. I really forget the name of that beer now, but that was a lovely Black IPA. And then they also did the Rauchmerzen, is the best German word ever, which was like a Rauch Lager. A Rauch Lager beer, which was very, very nicely done as well. And now they have this one, Labs number 4. So yeah, definitely check out the Lab series. I think they're going to try and release at least one beer through this every month over the next little while. But yeah, as I say, that's all I can tell you about Hyllie Bryggeri for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and have a taste of this beer then. I'll just let you have a little quick look at the artwork of this one before we open it up. There you can see this is one of these little 330 kind of Red Bull type cans. You can see this is the symbol for the Hyllie Lab series, the kind of deer with the hop flower on his head there, and you can see, I don't know how well you're going to see that, but you can see the water tower there. That is the Hyllie Bryggeri symbol. So yeah, Labs number thing. I noticed there's a bit of a typo on this one actually, because it says here Labs number 5. It says here Labs number 5, but it says on the can here number 4, and I'm pretty sure that this is, from having just looked at my list of the beers that I've had, I think actually this one, if I remember rightly, I think this actually is this is Labs, I think this might be Labs number 5 actually, come to think of it. So yeah, I think the other one that they had, just looking at my list of the beers that I've had from them here, would be the one that they did with Vistatha Bryggeri Hinken. So yeah, it's Hyllie and Vistatha Hinken was the first IPA, then there was the Cartwright Double IPA, which was a special version of the Hyllie Pan, then the Lazy Kitty Brewing was the Black IPA that they did. Then there's the Rauchmerzen. So yeah, this is number 5, but it says here Double Nitro Stout number 4. I don't know if that's the name of the beer, come to think of it, but maybe I've told you lies and this is actually, yeah, I think this is Hyllie Labs number 5. But maybe the beer name is actually Double Nitro Stout number 4. I'll need to check that when I publish the video. But anyway, it is the Hyllie Labs Stout number 5. So let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very curious to see what this guy has in store for us. Is this beer going to get a bit of a head? Let me see. Try to give it a bit of an aggressive pour there. Ah yeah, the head is forming just quite slowly, so we'll let that form for a second. But it says on the back here, Double Nitro Stout number 4 is not a standard beer. This dark roasted, thick, heavy barrel-aged Imperial Stout has notes of vanilla, chocolate, coffee, licorice and viola. Hyllie Labs is our experimental division where our love of craft beer is brought to you in small batches. Beers crafted at Hyllie contain only the finest hops and barley, sometimes accompanied with locally grown ingredients from our 17th century farm on the outskirts of Malmö. At Hyllie we want to share our devotion to independence, craftsmanship and quality with the community we live and work for. So yeah, quite nice I have to say. But yeah, the Hyllie Labs number 5 Double Nitro Stout, and I don't know why it says number 4 there. It must be maybe that this is the 4th batch of the beer or the 4th recipe or something like this. So yeah, it's poured exactly kind of as you would expect. You could see there was about a quarter to 1/3 finger of a frothy kind of medium tan head on this one. It's not the darkest of tan heads that I've seen, right enough, but that has just faded away to be a very kind of thin wispy layer on the top, and you do have a nice little ring around the very edge of the glass there. If we shine the light through this one, it's pretty much as black as night. You do get a little bit of a Coca-Cola colour edge, Pepsi Max kind of edge around the surface there, but mainly this beer is black as night. Yeah, lovely dark ebony rosewood colour there, which is exactly what you would expect from a big Imperial Stout like this one. So yeah, very little carbonation visible in this one. You know, technically speaking, we've got no carbonation because it is nitro conditioned. So yeah, the other thing I noticed was that you could actually kind of squeeze the can a little bit more in this one compared to how you could with a carbonated beer. So I think probably these beers are not under as high a pressure as the carbon dioxide ones. I'm trying to remember the standard pressures from chemistry of these gases. I think nitrogen is a little bit less, but yeah, I think this should be quite interesting, this one. So yeah, it's the interesting thing about nitrogen. It's an inert gas. It's almost an inert gas because of how strong the triple bond between the two nitrogen atoms. That's, you know, lightning. You have to use something as high energy as lightning to break that bond. It's kind of crazy fixing nitrogen, that. But yeah, lovely looking beer, this one. Let's take a closer look at the aroma and see how we get on here. Ooh, that does smell nice. And I mean, straight away with this, you can smell the barrel aging on this one. Yeah, one of the things with barrel aging, as I always say, you've got a little bit of a trade-off there with barrel aging. So the mouthfeel, the thickness of your beer goes down a little bit with barrel aging, but you get all of these kind of infused type flavours in the beer instead. So I think usually what quite a few breweries do is if they're going to barrel age a beer, they brew it a little bit thicker to kind of compensate for the slight loss of thickness to the beer. And you can do various things like that. You can put more malt in the malt base, or you can kind of lengthen the boil a little bit. And you can change what types of malts and things you're using as well, like a little bit more oatmeal and stuff like this when it comes to stouts. But yeah, you can smell the barrel aging on this one straight away. So this beer for me has a very kind of woody backbone. I think it smells like it would be bourbon barrels this has been aged in. It does smell a little bit like bourbon barrels, and they've got a little bit, it almost has a little bit of that kind of cherry wood type spice to it as well, which is quite interesting. It doesn't smell like a kind of straight up clean oaky vanilla that you would normally get. So it's there is an interesting aspect to the barrel aging in this one, but you do get an element of the kind of brown sugary sort of thing in there. And as I've always said, you know, being Scottish, I've always found that the American bourbon is quite a bit more kind of sugary and sweet, quite a bit more kind of brown sugary and sweet compared to Scotch whisky. But then again, a lot of Scotch whiskies these days, quite a lot of these whisky distilleries are part of the same group as American bourbon companies are. So quite often Scotch whisky distilleries use American bourbon barrels for their aging and stuff. So yeah, but yeah, straight away with this one you get that lovely kind of woody backbone, and I think the more you smell of this one, that sort of almost cherry wood, that kind of slightly spicy note that the wood has, just kind of fades away a little bit, and you start to get a kind of smoother oaky sort of thing out of it. So yeah, the aroma of this beer is absolutely lovely. I like the backbone that it has. But again, you're always going to get a good aroma out of these Hyllie beers. But it's exciting because this is my first Imperial Stout that's been brewed by them actually. So yeah, so lovely kind of barrel aged backbone to this. As I say, a little bit spicy, a little bit of that kind of bourbony brown sugar in there, and then you've got a whole host of other things coming in on top of this. So yeah, with this beer then you do get quite a bit of chocolate out of it, and it's quite an interesting chocolate, this one. You can smell some of the elements of a darker chocolate in there, you know, a 60-70% cocoa, but then you've also got the more milky aspects of this one as well. You've got a little bit of a kind of 30-40% cocoa chocolate in there too, which I think is really nice. You do get a wee bit of vanilla out of this one. As I say, that's partly from the barrel aged side of the beer, but I think there's also a little bit of it, it also kind of mixes in with the chocolate as well, and I think that's what's given the impression of a more kind of milky chocolate. For me, there is a good little bit of brown sugar to this one. There is a wee bit of that treacle molasses sort of thing in there, but I get quite a sweet caramel out of this beer too, especially right in the middle of the nose. I've got a feeling this one's going to be quite complex on the palate, to be honest with you. But there's one or two little kind of, there are one or two little, how would you say, kind of nutty elements to this beer, which is quite nice. Those are kind of subtleties. There's one or two, and as I say, you get the whole woody sort of thing to it. I don't really get the kind of tobacco or things like that you can sometimes get from these beers. So for me, this has got a lovely kind of barrel aged backbone to it, a little touch of a kind of spiciness in there, some nice chocolatey mix, good little kind of brown sugary quality to it as well, and then you've got that nice vanilla in there. I don't get the licorice out of this that they're saying in the on the can. I don't get the licorice out of the aroma in here, but yeah, I do definitely get the chocolate and the brown sugars and all the other kind of things. It comes across as a really quite nice smelling beer from the malty side of things. So let's just look at the hoppy and fruity side of it quickly. So yeah, for me, I would say that on the hoppy side of things, you do get a little bit of earthiness out of this one. It's quite a smooth earthiness. There's a wee tiny touch of floral character there. I do get a fair little bit of grassiness out of it as well, but I mean, an Imperial Stout like this is not going to be the most kind of hoppy of beers. It is a little bit more of a, you know, they are going to be kind of more smooth and more malt focused. You do expect that from an Imperial Stout, but you've got a nice bit of, you do have a nice bit of fruitiness to this beer as well. I wonder what hop they would have used in this, to be honest with you. Yeah, I wonder what hop they would have used in this. But it's got a lovely fruitiness to it. You do get a little bit of a plummy, raisiny sort of thing. And you can smell there's a bit of a kind of blackcurranty blackberry quality to this beer as well. So you've got those nice, quite rich berry and kind of red fruits in there, which I think is really quite nice. So this has got a lovely aroma to it, this one. It doesn't smell too different from other Imperial Stouts that I've had, to be quite honest with you. So yeah, there's nothing overly surprising about this beer in terms of its aroma either, but it does smell very, very nice. I think that's a good way to sum it up. So as I always say, take a bit of time to just mull over the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it, but we're going to have a taste of this one now and see how we get on. So this one is the Hyllie Labs number 5. We have established that it is Hyllie Labs number 5 just now, the Double Nitro Stout, coming in at 10% ABV from Hyllie Bryggeri, released in November 2020 as part of their experimental lab series. So let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and definitely cool to try my first Imperial Stout from Hyllie Bryggeri. Now, that's really interesting. For me, it's very strange not to have the carbonation. But this is I'm going to say straight away, this is a lovely beer. Because the thing that you get out of this, the first impression that I have of this is that the beer comes to be, it comes to be quite a dry Imperial Stout actually, just on the first kind of sip of it. But it's so strange to have that kind of roasty dryness to the beer, the roasty kind of black malty side of things, but not to have a bit of carbonation in with that. To me, that's really kind of unusual. But I guess it's something that if you drink a few nitro beers you would become accustomed to. But I'm going to say straight away that the flavour of this beer is really nice, but I think I'm a little bit of a traditionalist in that way. I think I do prefer a little bit of carbonation, to be honest. So yeah. I can see why people would kind of like this level of sort of smoothness and things in their Imperial Stouts. And yeah, this is a lovely, the flavour of this beer is kind of lovely. I do wonder what the motivation was for making this a nitro rather than, you know, just kind of doing it normally with the CO2. But yeah, I'd be curious to know why they chose that for this one. But it's a lovely, it is a lovely tasting beer, this one. As I say, my first impression of this is that it becomes quite dry, and the strange thing for me, as I say, is that you don't have the carbonation to you don't have the carbonation to kind of back that up almost. So yeah, let's kind of focus on the flavour of this beer then. Let's break it down. So straight away with this beer, you feel a nice kind of woody quality coming out of it. Yeah, there is quite a nice, you can feel that nice kind of bourbon woody sort of thing. The wood, it doesn't come across, you do get a little touch of that kind of almost sort of cherry wood, almost cedary wood kind of spicy thing to it. But yeah, the kind of smooth woodiness, that forms the backbone of the beer, then the other things kind of sit on top of it. So yeah, that in the middle third of your palate and the back third of your palate, that is what forms the very kind of baseline of the beer. On top of that though, you do get some of these kind of roasty toasty black malt things. It's a little bit like you know, like a really well fired bread crust. I would think that going by the flavour in this one, it might be Special B that's in this, and I learned that. I actually learned that from Nerd Brewing, because I know that Nerd Brewing, they love to use a little bit of Special B in their beers, and Special B's got that very kind of dry, well-fired bread crusty type quality to it, so you can pick up a little bit of that in this beer. But I do wonder if there could be a little bit of Carafa in here, because I know that the guys at Hyllie, they are a fan of German things, and this one, there is a wee element of Carafa in there, so it could also be some sort of Carafa that's in this one, because Carafa's got that lovely smooth kind of brown bready thing to it as well on top, just that lies on top of the well-fired bread crust. And when you go into the middle third of your palate, and you know, on top of that woody note that I was talking about, you get a very smooth kind of well-fired bread crusty quality, and there is a nice kind of little layer of a kind of brown bread kind of sitting on top of that, like a wholemeally grainy bread sort of thing. So yeah, this beer has a lot of interesting layers to it actually. I like how everything goes together in this one. Yeah, I do like how this goes together. I mean, this is I wasn't sure, to be honest with you, what to expect with this one, but to me this is quite a quirky Imperial Stout compared to other ones that I've had. I like the balance it has between the woodiness and the kind of roasty toasty backbone of the stout actually. So yeah, this one, on the back third of your palate, you can feel the sort of breadiness of the beer, I think, thickens up a little bit, and then as you come further forward, it's got a lovely smoothness to it. You can get the roasty toasty, you get some of the more roasty toasty malts at the very back of the palate, but as you come further forward, the beer, it smoothens out a little bit. The thickness goes down a little bit as you get into the middle of the palate, and then you've got some nice, as I say, you've got some nice chocolatey notes in there. On top of the bread, you've got a nice kind of powdery, almost, it's almost like the kind of hot chocolate powder that you use, like the O'boy in Sweden, and you know, like the Nesquik powders that we would use back home in Scotland. It's got a little bit of that kind of hot chocolatey sort of powder thing to it, which I really quite like. It's got quite a powdery dark chocolate there. So yeah, probably about a 70 or 80% cocoa chocolate. I don't get so much of the milky chocolate in this one that I was picking out in the aroma. I don't get so much of that in the flavour. But yeah, in the middle of your palate, there's definitely an element of brown sugar in this one. You do get a wee bit of the treacly molasses sort of thing, but the brown sugar actually comes across to me as being considerably more light than that. It's got quite a nice kind of sweetness to it, and it has a wee bit of a toasty kind of thing to it as well. I wouldn't describe this beer as biscuity at all. This one's definitely got a little more of that kind of toasty caramel rather than being biscuity. So yeah, it's got the caramelly brown sugar notes in this are very, very nice. And at 10% ABV, this thing is ridiculously easy drinking. But again, I think that's down to the conditioning of this beer. But you've also got some nice, you've got one or two little nutty undertones to this beer. If you go to the very centre of your palate and then move forward a bit, you're going to get a few kind of nutty undertones to this one. Again, in the flavour of this though, I don't get the licorice hints that they're talking about in this one. It's you know, I just don't get that with this. To me, this is more chocolate. It's more kind of roasty and toasty, chocolatey, brown sugar, and then you've got the barrel aging components to it there, which I think is really interesting. So yeah, these little fruit fly things are annoying. I think I've got one that goes around my room, tries to nick my beer, and you're like, no, you're not having it. But yeah, this beer, the malty side of this beer is really interesting. I do really like how this goes together. So in terms of the hoppy side of things, then I think we've covered the malty side of the beer as much as we kind of should. In the hoppy side of things, in the back corners of your palate, you do have a nice little bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward along the kind of front side of your tongue, you've got a nice you do have a nice little bit of there's a wee bit of a herbal quality there, and as you reach the front corners of the palate, it does have a little bit of floral aromaticity. Round the front curve of the palate, it's distinctly more light and grassy, and there is almost, I do get the slightest hint of like a very slight zestiness out of the grassy side of this beer. I do wonder what hop it is that's in here. Summit maybe, or could it be like Eureka or something like that? I don't know. But you definitely feel that the hop's kind of smoothing out a little bit, but there is just a tiny hint of zestiness. It does just feel a little bit fresh on the very front third of your tongue, but on the very front tip of your tongue, sorry, but on the front third of your tongue, this is where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And it's interesting because you can feel underneath that the woodiness does kind of spread forward on this one, and it's got a wee bit of that kind of dry, spicy, woody sort of thing. But yeah, there is a nice little bit of kind of fruity juiciness to this beer. So let's examine that now. So when you take the beer in, you're going to get a nice little bit of a kind of, I get quite a little bit of a plummy sort of thing out of this one. It does come across as a little bit more plummy rather than raisiny. Doesn't really have quite the sharpness that you would normally get for raisins, but then yeah, you do have, it comes across as almost a little bit cakey, like a kind of, like almost like a kind of Christmas puddingy type cake on the front third of your palate. So yeah, it does develop a kind of slightly figgy note, but yeah, it is quite plummy, and it's got quite an oily sort of plummy character on the back of that front third of your tongue. But then as you reach the front half of that front third of your tongue, that's when you get the more blackcurranty, blackberry sort of things out of this beer, and those are quite oily, to be honest, in this one. So yeah, the fruity notes are not quite as complex as I thought they might be, and I do wonder how much of that is due to the conditioning, because I think usually if you had carbon dioxide in this, the fruits might just come out a little bit differently. You might have the kind of plummy raisins at the back, the kind of figs in the middle of it, and then the more oily blackcurrant notes. But yeah, for me, this one's a little bit, you do get that more oily, plummy note at the back of that front third of your tongue, and then you get a little bit more of the blackcurranty, blackberry sort of thing coming out of it as well. So yeah, I do like how the fruits go together in this one, and I do wonder how much of that can be attributed to the difference in conditioning with this beer. As I say, I'm not familiar with the nitro conditioning very much at all, so yeah, it is quite interesting how all of this goes together, to be honest. So yeah, I'm just going to say, this is a lovely, lovely beer, this one, and I think the barrel aging gives it a really interesting balance, because I think that the nitro maybe means that some flavours don't come out quite as much, so that I think that maybe replacing the CO2 with the nitro, and adding in the sort of barrel aging side of things. I think that makes this beer really quite interesting in a lot of ways. So sorry about the edit there, guys. Camera memory card just being a pain again. But yeah, like I was saying, for me it's really interesting the balance of this beer in terms of the flavour, because I think in some ways not using the CO2 maybe takes away from the emphasis of some flavours, but I think that the kind of depth of the barrel aging really puts the focus on other things. So yeah, maybe this is definitely something that I need to kind of explore a little bit more. I maybe need to try a few more of these big Nitro Imperial Stouts and just see what I think about them, because I know there are a few back home in Scotland, so maybe I can check out a couple of those over the Christmas period or something like that. But you don't get too many nitro conditioned beers here in Sweden, come to think of it. So yeah, I'll keep an eye out for these and see what we can do. But yeah, nitro conditioning is something I do need to explore just a little bit more, so we'll keep that in mind. But yeah, let's just say lovely beer, this one. And it's got a really interesting balance between the kind of woody side of things and the kind of brown sugars and the chocolate. It does get a little bit drier the further you go into the aftertaste. The woodiness kind of sits there in the middle of your palate, a little bit of the kind of roasty toasty sort of things, and some of the brown sugars as well. I really like how this one goes together. In terms of the how do you say, the mouthfeel, then this one's a little bit difficult to place actually. For me, I would describe this one, it's kind of top end and mid-bodied for me. Carbonation, you know, there's like no carbonation technically, but it's got a very, very smooth mouthfeel to it. It's very slick actually in a lot of ways. In terms of bitterness, I think this beer does have a fairly high degree of bitterness. I think this has got to be about 70. Possibly 80 IBUs. I think it's somewhere up around then, because you do get a good bit of dryness out of it, a little bit of that roasty toasty special B black malt sort of thing. There's quite a bit of that to this one. There's also a good little bit of earthy bitterness to the beer as well, but at the same time the nitro conditioning really smooths the whole thing out, so it doesn't seem as bitter as I think it actually is. So yeah, you've got that whole thing to it. The malt base, like I say, has a balance between the kind of roasty toasty black malts, a bit of a sweet chocolate and brown sugar thing, and then you've also got the kind of woody complexities to it as well. But you've also got, pardon me, you've also got those kind of juicy, oily fruits from it, which is kind of interesting, and a bit of that more cakey element on the front part of the palate as well. So yeah, this is a really, really quirky beer. It's one that has made me think about another variable, which is the conditioning, because I think that's something that we don't give a lot of consideration to when it comes to the beers. Usually it's the yeast, the hops, and the malts that we're always focusing on. But yeah, the conditioning, I think, can change the way that flavours come out quite dramatically, and you know, these nitro stouts I think prove that a little bit. So for me, yeah, the nitro conditioning in this one is very interesting, and I think the barrel aging kind of just puts the focus, the emphasis of certain flavours in a slightly different way. So yeah, I do like how this one goes together. So big thumbs up to Hyllie Bryggeri for this one, and I guess we can leave it at that for this review. I think this is another very interesting beer, but I would be curious to see them do kind of a regular version of this, but I'm not sure what the next release in the Hyllie labs is going to be. I'm hoping that it might be a Christmas Doppelbock or a Christmas Scotch Ale or something like that. This could be very interesting actually. I'd love to see them do a Doppelbock or a Scotch Ale, that would be great. Or even a Belgian Quad could be an interesting thing. I've never had a Belgian type beer from Hyllie Bryggeri either, but we'll see what they release from this lab series. But I would recommend you keep an eye on the Lokalis Muskelite and see what they have coming out, because they'll produce random things like this, which is always pretty good. But Skånsk Lager and Hyllie Pan all the way, those are awesome beers if you're trying this brewery for the very first time. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. So this one was the Hyllie Labs number 5, the Double Nitro Stout, coming in at 10% ABV from Hyllie Bryggeri, currently in Vintria, to the south of Malmö, but quite soon in the very centre of Malmö. They'll be one of the most central breweries actually, which is pretty cool. So yeah, awesome beer this one, really interesting in terms of quirkiness. and it's quite different from other beers I've had from these guys before, so make sure you check this one out. I think you guys will really enjoy this one, so let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Hyllie Bryggeri, and we will return to these guys at some point very, very soon, I'm sure. This one was the Hyllie Labs Series number 5, the Double Nitro Stout, coming in at 10% ABV, released in November of 2020. Slàinte, skull, cheers, check out my social media, check out Hyllie Bryggeri, and thank you for watching.